He was just a barefoot boy in an alley, and the billionaire didn't even realize he'd dropped $100 bill. But what happened next unraveled secrets no one was ready for. Why did this child return the money without asking for anything in return? Why did his little sister flinch at every sound? And why were there no records of where they lived? And why, out of all the buildings in a city of millions, did these children seem to find their way to him? When Elliot Vance, one of the most powerful men in Ravenshill, looked into those children's eyes, he didn't see poverty. He saw a system that failed them, and a second chance he didn't know he needed. But could one man stand against corruption that reached even his own boardroom? Could love rebuild what the courts, the state, and silence had broken? This is a story of quiet choices, loud truths, and what happens when the smallest hands hold the power to change the biggest lives. If you've ever believed one moment of honesty can change everything, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin. It was supposed to be a simple walk, just air, just a break from the pressure, the numbers, the 1,000 invisible threads pulling at Elliot Vance's every decision. But that evening, as the city of Ravenshill hummed beneath the weight of early spring rain, something shifted. Elliot had just left the Ravenshill Tech and Trade Forum, a high-stakes quarterly briefing where board members barked about growth margins and overseas expansions. 42 years old, dressed in his signature slate gray suit and leather Oxfords. Elliot had stood at the center of it all like he always did, unshaken, efficient, cold. But the truth was, he hadn't felt present in months. He didn't even tell his driver when he slipped out the side exit and down the narrow steps into one of the older alleys that split off from the downtown loop. It was quiet down there. Wet concrete glistened under the dim city lights. A dumpster let off a faint, sour smell, and pigeons pecked at forgotten fries. Elliot walked, hands in pockets, ignoring the buzz of his phone. He was tired, not from work but from emptiness, from the relentless pressure of building something no one could touch, while feeling like everything inside him had slowly gone numb. And then, "Sir," a voice called behind him. It was small, but sharp, a sound that sliced clean through the fog in his mind. He turned, his brow furrowing instinctively. Behind him, standing in the mouth of the alley, was a boy, no older than 10, thin, wiry, with short brown hair that clung to his damp forehead. His face was streaked with dirt, and his eyes, God. Those eyes were an icy gray blue that didn't belong on a child. The boy wore a tattered hoodie, one sleeve ripped at the cuff. His jeans were rolled at the ankles, and his feet bare. Raw-looking, red from the cold pavement. Next to him, clinging to the boy's side like a shadow, stood a little girl, maybe 3. Her tiny fingers gripped the hem of his hoodie, and her wide, glassy eyes peeked out from under a mop of curly hair that had once been golden. She wore a faded dress that might have been pink in another life. It was soaked now. Her bare legs were trembling. The boy raised one hand and pointed behind Elliot. "You dropped this," he said simply. Elliot followed the direction of his finger. There, resting on the wet ground, was a folded 100 bill, still crisp, still clean. A bill Elliot hadn't even realized he'd lost. He blinked, bent down, picked it up slowly. "How did you know it was mine?" he asked, his voice soft but edged with the suspicion of a man used to being taken advantage of. The boy didn't flinch. "I saw it fall from your coat when you passed us." There was no pride in his voice, no fear either, just fact. You could have kept it, Elliot said. The boy shrugged. It's not mine. Those 3 words hit Elliot harder than any boardroom betrayal ever had. He glanced down at the child beside him. She hadn't spoken. She hadn't moved. She just pressed her small body tighter against the boy's leg, eyes never leaving Elliot's. Are you 2 alone out here? Elliot asked. The boy hesitated. Sort of. He nodded. We live in a house with other kids. A man watches us. He says he takes care of us. The tone in his voice made Elliot's stomach tighten. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the way he said them carefully, like someone reciting a script. And your parents? Elliot asked gently. The boy looked away. Don't have any. I was left at a shelter when I was a baby. Her mom died in a hospital. That's what they told us. Elliot crouched slowly, eye level with the boy now. The girl shrank slightly, her fingers gripping the boy's side with new urgency. What's your name? Elliot asked. The boy didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, he said, Jayden. Her name's Lila. Jayden's eyes never wavered. Steady, stronger than any child should ever have to be. Elliot noticed the stack of newspapers under Jayden's other arm, soggy now, but still bundled tight. You sell, those Jayden nodded. That's our job. We're not supposed to come back without selling them. And if you don't... Jayden didn't answer. Elliot's voice dropped. Jayden, what happens if you don't sell them all? Jayden looked down. We don't eat. Lila sniffled, her little nose red from the cold. Jayden shifted instinctively and pulled off his hoodie, draping it over her shoulders. She leaned into him, silent. Elliot felt his throat tighten. He reached into his wallet, pulled out a fresh 20. I'll take 20 papers, he said. Jayden didn't smile. He didn't act surprised. He just handed over the full stack, nodding with quiet gratitude. Thank you, sir. Elliot paused. You look out for her. Jayden's eyes darkened. Always, that single word, that tone. It was the kind of fierce loyalty Elliot hadn't seen in decades. He wanted to ask more. He wanted to know where they lived, who this man was. But before he could speak again, a sharp voice rang out from the far end of the alley. Jay, let's go, a boy. Older, maybe 12, appeared in the shadows. He looked edgy, watching. Jayden flinched. Lila clutched tighter. Now. Jayden lifted Lila into his arms without a word, her thin arms wrapped around his neck like instinct. Elliot stepped forward. Wait. Jayden paused. Thank you. For the paper. He turned. Lila's eyes never left Elliot's, and then they were gone. The sound of their footsteps faded into the night. The alley fell silent once more. But something inside Elliot Vance was no longer quiet. He looked down at the wet newspaper in his hands. His own face stared back at him from the business section. The headline, Vance Industries to Reshape West Coast Housing. He folded it gently and whispered to the empty alley, I'm not done with this. Not yet. Elliot didn't sleep that night. He lay awake on the corner of his sectional sofa in the penthouse, surrounded by silence, city lights blinking outside the floor-to-ceiling windows like stars that had forgotten how to shine. His shirt was still buttoned, collar askew, and the folded newspaper from earlier sat on the coffee table in front of him like a question he couldn't answer. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the boy's face, Jayden, not pleading, not afraid, just steady, like a kid who had long ago stopped expecting anything from anyone. And Lila, 3 years old, maybe younger, barefoot, silent, her little dress soaked with rain. Those eyes had said more in 1 second than most boardroom meetings did in an hour. Elliot rubbed the back of his neck. He had seen homeless children before, in cities, in news segments, but this was different. Because this time, the child had stopped him, looked him in the eye, gave him back something he didn't even know he'd lost, and asked for nothing in return. Why didn't I ask more? Where were they staying? Who was this man Jayden mentioned? What was really happening behind those careful, well-rehearsed words? He stared at the 100 bill lying beside the paper on the table. Something about it felt heavier now. At 7:03 a.m., Elliot walked into his personal office and called his assistant. Harper answered on the second ring. "I need your help," he said, skipping any greeting. She paused. "Of course. What's going on?" "There's a boy, maybe 10. I met him last night downtown, selling newspapers." A beat of silence, and he gave me back a $100 bill I didn't know I dropped. Said he couldn't keep what wasn't his. He was barefoot. He had his sister with him, younger, 3, maybe 4, dirty, quiet, afraid. Harper's voice was softer now. "You want me to find them?" "I want to know who they are," Elliot said, "where they live, who's watching them. If it's legal, if it's safe." "You're serious," she murmured. "I've never been more serious." She didn't ask more, just said, "I'm on it," and hung up. By midday, Harper had tracked down a few leads, street cam footage, a glimpse of the boy in a convenience store window 2 days earlier. The logo on the newspaper bundle helped. They were printed by a small independent press called the Ravenshill Echo, a local rag often handed out by shelters as part of community work programs. They usually distribute through foster groups or youth shelters, Harper explained, flipping through a manila folder she dropped on Elliot's desk. They don't pay the kids, but the foster homes get grant money per distribution point. Elliot's jaw tightened. So it's legal, technically, but what's legal doesn't always mean what's right. He exhaled through his nose, fingers steepled in front of his mouth, but what's legal doesn't always mean what's right. He exhaled through his nose, fingers steepled in front of his mouth. He glanced at the still image Harper printed. Jayden's face, caught in a grainy freeze frame, looked directly at the lens like he knew someone was watching. That same quiet steadiness, that same absence of fear, but there was something else, too, something Elliot hadn't seen in the alley, exhaustion, not the kind that came from missing a meal, the kind that came from carrying more than a child should ever have to hold. He stared longer than he realized. "I want someone to look into every shelter associated with that paper," he said. Quietly. "I know a guy," Harper replied. "Used to work for the city's oversight committee. Left when they started cutting corners. What's his name? Caleb Monroe. He won't sugarcoat anything. He's not cheap." Elliot didn't blink. Set up a meeting. Fog crawled down from the hills, curling around the buildings like breath on cold glass. He thought about Jayden's shoes or lack of them, Lila's trembling legs, the way she had clung to him. That wasn't just a sibling bond, that was survival instinct. He leaned back, hands behind his head, and for the first time in years, Elliot Vance felt something new, helpless, not professionally, not financially, but emotionally, and maybe even morally. He had spent a lifetime building empires, winning contracts, negotiating hostile takeovers with nothing but steel in his tone, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd failed someone without even realizing it. that he'd walked away from something that mattered. Later that night, Harper called again. I spoke to Caleb. He wants to meet in person. Good. When he said he's already waiting in the cafe across from the Central Shelter on King Street. Said you'd show up if you were serious. Elliot stood from his desk. I'm on my way. The cafe was small, tucked between a pharmacy and a pawn shop. No branding, no music, just the hiss of old espresso machines and the clink of chipped mugs. Caleb Monroe was waiting in the back booth. Tall, broad-shouldered, gray beard trimmed sharp, wore a brown wool coat and carried a folder thick enough to hold a minor scandal. Elliot slid into the seat opposite him. "You've got my attention," he said. Caleb opened the folder. "What you're looking into, these youth work programs, they're technically legal, but they're abused. Kids from broken homes, orphans, sometimes trafficked in from other states, shuffled through ghost shelters that no one properly audits." He pulled out a photo. Jayden, standing outside a rundown house with a stack of papers in hand, Lila beside him, asleep in a milk crate with a blanket over her legs. Elliot stared at it, throat dry. "That's them." Caleb nodded. "House is managed by a man named Russell Brandt. Multiple children under one roof, all of them wards with paper trails that look legitimate until you scratch deeper. And when you do, things start to stink." He slid another document across the table. Intake form. No listed parents. No verified background checks. A forged address. Elliot ran his thumb down the edge of the paper. "They go hungry if they don't sell yes. That's the arrangement. They don't call it that, of course. They call it incentivized independence." Elliot scoffed. "And no one stops it. No one looks long enough." The rain started outside, soft at first, then heavier. Elliot looked up at the window, then back at the photo, and finally at Caleb. "I want everything you can find," he said quietly. "Every document, every report, every name, and I want it now." Caleb studied him for a beat. "You're not doing this for PR, are you?" Elliot shook his head. "I'm doing this because I saw them, and once you've seen them, you can't pretend anymore." Elliot Vance had read countless reports in his life, financial statements, merger agreements, investor briefs thicker than textbooks, but nothing prepared him for the file that now sat open on his mahogany desk. He had asked Caleb Monroe to bring everything. Caleb delivered. The photo on top was of a narrow, aging house on Ashby Lane, one of those forgotten corners of Ravenshill where sidewalks buckled and weeds curled out of cracked porches. It was where Russell Brandt operated what he called a home education model. 10 children registered under his care, no legal foster license, no certified curriculum, just a thin web of loosely connected documentation that looked acceptable on the surface until you peeled it back. Elliot's fingers hovered over the next page like he was afraid to touch it. Intake summaries, redacted addresses, names of minors scribbled in different handwriting, the same signature repeated under different dates. Then he saw it again. Jayden Cole. Age 10. Intake date 2 years ago. No emergency contact. No guardian listed besides Brandt. And just under that, Lila Cole. Estimated age 3. Relationship to Jayden's sibling guardian, which meant, legally, Jayden was listed as her sole caretaker, a 10-year-old raising a toddler. Elliot's throat tightened. He flipped to the next page and found a schedule. Each child was given 5 jobs a week: newspaper sales, bottled water on street corners, window washing at gas stations, none of it under formal employment. none of it under watch. Just a rotating list of city intersections. If they didn't meet the daily quota, they were denied meals. The language was clinical, detached. Incentive model protocol, monitored behavior reports. But what it really meant was simple. Don't sell, don't eat. Elliot leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking beneath him. He looked out at the city, its rooftops blurred under a gray April sky. In the distance, high above the city skyline, one of his company's new billboards glowed in soft LED Innovate, Elevate, Vance Tech, a slogan he once loved. Now, it felt like a joke. He stood abruptly, unable to sit still, and paced to the window. His reflection stared back at him, sharp suit, clean lines, silver watch ticking dutifully on his wrist. He had everything he once dreamed of. But, in the reflection, something felt hollow. He thought of Jayden's voice. Steady, older than it had any right to be, because it's not mine, sir. He hadn't lied. He hadn't begged. He just told the truth and waited for the world to catch up. And now Elliot knew for telling that truth. Jayden had been punished. 2 days, no food, because he broke a rule by speaking. What kind of man lets that happen and does nothing? His phone buzzed. It was Harper. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. "I'm already drowning in paper," Elliot muttered. "No, Elliot, this isn't paper. This is footage." Within 30 minutes, Harper was in his office, her expression grim. She had a tablet in hand and slid it across the desk to him. The video was grainy, black and white, captured from a built-in camera across the street from Brandt's property. It didn't have sound, but it didn't need it. Jayden stood outside the house, hands at his sides, face toward the door. Russell Brandt stepped out, a thick-set man with a hunched posture and slow, deliberate movements. He shoved Jayden back with one hand, not hard, but enough to make the boy stumble. Jayden didn't flinch. He simply stood again. Brandt pointed toward the gate. Jayden looked behind him, where Lila was curled on the step, her legs tucked under her. Brandt said something sharp. Jayden moved toward her. Brandt grabbed his shoulder and spun him around, yelling. Elliot watched, fists clenched, as the man pointed down the street. The implication was clear. Jayden hadn't sold enough. He wasn't coming inside, not yet, not until he earned it. Then came the worst part. Jayden looked down at his little sister and sat next to her, on the porch, in the cold, shoulders squared, face blank, wrapping his hoodie tighter around her body. They weren't allowed in, so he stayed out with her. Elliot reached for the pause button, his finger shaking. He couldn't watch more. He stood again, pacing. His breath came shorter now. He remembered his own childhood, not perfect, but safe. A warm bed, a mother who packed his lunch, a father who left notes in his jacket pocket. He had taken it all for granted. Jayden had none of that. Jayden had a little girl who depended on him, and the world had handed him punishment in place of praise. Harper's voice broke the silence. "There are more videos, and it's not just Jayden, it's all of them. I want every frame," Elliot said. "We're working with Caleb to document everything. He's drafting a report for the state attorney. I'm not waiting on bureaucracy," Elliot snapped, louder than intended. He caught himself, rubbed a hand over his mouth. "Sorry, you're angry," Harper said gently. "You should be." He turned toward her, something vulnerable behind his eyes. "I've closed 1,000 deals, but this isn't a deal. This is a war. Harper didn't flinch. Then let's fight it. That night, Elliot didn't go home. He drove through the wet back streets of Ravenshill, past shuttered pawn shops, flickering street lights, and the glow of gas station signage. He didn't know what he was looking for. He just knew he couldn't sit still. He ended up back at the alley, the one where he first saw Jayden and Lila. It was empty now, just puddles reflecting old neon. He parked the car and stepped out, letting the rain soak his sleeves. He didn't care. He needed to feel something, needed the cold. He walked slowly to the corner where Jayden had stood, then sat down on the same concrete step, and for the first time in years, Elliot Vance cried, not because he was weak, but because he finally understood the difference between surviving the world and living in it. He took his phone from his pocket and opened a new note. 3 words: find the truth. He hit save, then sat in the silence until the rain stopped. The next morning, Elliot was already at Harper's desk by 7:45. No coffee, no greeting, no tie, just a deep weariness in his eyes and a voice stripped of performance. "Where's Caleb?" "He's waiting for you downstairs," Harper said. "He brought someone else this time." Elliot tilted his head slightly, brow raised. "Who a social worker? Used to work with displaced kids until her budget got cut in half by the last city council. She's freelance now. Knows the legal cracks these people crawl through." Elliot nodded once. "Let's go." The room they met in wasn't one of his glass conference chambers. It was a small, private conference nook Harper reserved in the basement for a quieter space. No security cameras, no echo. Caleb stood near the corner, arms crossed. Beside him sat a woman in her early 40s, mixed race, high cheekbones, curls pinned into a practical bun. Her name was Sienna Marks. Her expression was hard to read, but her eyes said she'd seen things that never made it into police reports. Elliot took the seat across from her. "You've seen the footage?" he asked. "Yes. And more than that. I've seen it happen before. Meaning Russell Brant isn't new." Sienna said. "He's just still around, still slippery. He moves children through legal gray zones, guardianship loopholes. He's fostered 38 minors in the past 6 years. Only 12 are still traceable." Elliot's chest tightened. The rest gone, reassigned, lost in the system. He looked down. "Jesus, he's smart." Sienna continued. "He files guardianship in counties where oversight is lowest, keeps kids under different last names, moves them before anyone gets suspicious. But how does no one notice they do?" Caleb said. "They just don't care." Sienna leaned forward. "The ones who make noise, they're usually kids like Jayden. Brave, smart, protective. The ones who know something's wrong." Elliot thought back to the boy's steady voice, the way he stood between Lila and the world, like he'd already made peace with the fact that no one was coming, until now. "Can we stop him?" Elliot asked. Sienna exchanged a look with Caleb. "Legally, we can delay him," she said. "With enough evidence, we can bring the house under investigation, but full removal, that'll take time. And kids don't have time." Elliot's jaw tightened. "Then we do it without the paperwork." Caleb stepped in. "You mean illegal surveillance? I mean private observation? Around the clock? I want proof. I want eyes on that house, on him, on every single kid he's exploiting. You told me there were 10 under that roof. That's 9 others we haven't even seen yet." Caleb hesitated. "I'll get my guys, quiet ones." Elliot nodded. "I'll cover everything." Sienna's tone softened. "Mr. Vance, this might not end with just exposure. These kids, if they're removed, where do they go next?" Elliot blinked. "Are you asking if I'm ready to take them? I'm asking if you're ready to be the one who doesn't disappear after the rescue. Because that's the part that really saves them." For the first time, Elliot didn't answer. Not because he didn't want to, but because it hadn't occurred to him. Not fully. Not yet. That night, while the rest of Ravenshill crawled into weekend rest, Elliot stayed inside his penthouse office, blinds down, walls lit only by the glow of his monitor. Harper had forwarded a full, updated packet from Caleb. The surveillance team had started already. He clicked through the first folder, a photo, then another. Jayden sweeping the small yard behind the house, Lila watching from the stoop, a third child, barely older than Jayden, crouched behind the trash bins, eating something from a torn paper bag. A video clip followed. The camera caught Brant's voice this time, low and gruff, barking orders at a boy who couldn't have been more than 8. The child flinched, then handed over the day's cash in a Ziploc bag. That's how he was doing it. The children weren't begging. They were selling small items papers, bottled water, mints, legal loopholes, but the money always went back to him. Another photo, the one that stopped Elliot cold. Jayden kneeling beside Lila, helping her pull on a mismatched pair of shoes, his hands gentle, his eyes focused, like nothing else mattered in the world except keeping her warm. He zoomed in on the boy's fingers, bruised knuckles, probably from defending her, probably from surviving. He closed the file. He sat back and whispered to the dark, "I'm not just going to rescue them. I'm going to destroy the system that let this happen." The next day, he met with Harper again. She laid a single file on his desk. "What's this?" "The foundation." He looked up. "The what you asked, what comes next?" Harper said, "This is it. A private foundation. Your name, your rules, a full team of social caseworkers, lawyers, trauma therapists, and investigators. You got the money. Let's give it direction." Elliot opened the folder. The top sheet read The Lila Project. He stared at it for a moment, then smiled. Just slightly. "She still hasn't said a word, has she?" "No," Harper said, "but she doesn't need to. Her eyes have said enough." That evening, Elliot walked the long halls of his home alone. Marble floors, cold light, rooms that echoed. He passed his empty dining table and paused. What if this place wasn't so empty? What if it echoed with laughter instead? Later that night, Harper sent a single text. One of the boys tried to run today. Brant locked him in the crawl space under the stairs. For hours. Elliot didn't reply right away. He stared at the screen. Then he stood, pulled on a coat, and left the house without a word. He didn't go to the office. He didn't go to the alley. He went to the house, Ashby Lane, 721, the same cracked porch, the same broken mailbox. He parked 2 blocks away and approached slowly, staying in the shadows, no sound, just the dull hum of the porch light buzzing. Then, from the side of the house, a movement, a shape, Jayden, sneaking out the back. Elliot froze, hidden behind a tree. Jayden was carrying something, a bottle of water, a worn blanket, and a roll of paper towels. He crept into the small shed behind the house. Elliot moved closer, soundless, and through the crack in the shed wall, he saw it. Another child. Coughing, covered in dust. Shivering. Jayden knelt beside him, whispered something, offered the blanket, pressed the water bottle to the boy's lip, and then sat beside him and waited. Elliot stepped back, breath caught in his throat. That boy wasn't just surviving, he was saving others too, and yet no one was saving him. Not yet. Elliot returned to his car, hands shaking. He sat behind the wheel, then pulled out his phone. "Caleb," he said when the line picked up, "we move this week. I don't care what it takes." Elliot Vance hadn't slept in 2 days. Not properly, not peacefully. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Jayden kneeling in that shed, wrapping a dusty blanket around another child's shoulders, a child who looked half-conscious, coughing so hard it rattled the walls, and Jayden, not flinching, not complaining, just present, still, composed, as if he believed somehow that his job was to take care of everyone else, even if no one ever came to take care of him. The memory haunted Elliot more than the footage, more than the files, more than the entire house of forged documents stacked in his private archive. Because that wasn't surveillance. That was reality. And he'd seen it with his own eyes. He paced his study as the sun rose over Ravenshill, casting a soft pink wash across the skyline. Normally, this would be the hour he reviewed investor forecasts, made market calls, reviewed his speaking notes for the quarterly summit. Instead, he was standing barefoot on the cold hardwood floor, coffee gone cold in his hand. While Harper's voice came through the speakerphone, "We've got confirmation. The house holds 10 kids. Brant is listed as legal guardian on 8, but the other 2 have no paperwork. They're off the books completely." "What does that mean?" Elliot asked. "It means they're ghosts. No Social Security, no medical records. One might have been smuggled in from Idaho 3 years ago under a false surname. The other, we're not sure. No name, just a nickname." Elliot ran a hand through his hair. "God. We also found something else." Harper continued. "Brant has a cousin. Works at a regional office for child welfare. He's been pushing paperwork through without review for years. So it's bigger than Brant. It always was." Elliot sank into the leather armchair by the window and stared out at the rooftops. The city was waking up. Traffic had returned. Steam rose from the vents on the office towers. But in that one decaying house, children were probably already being woken up with commands. "Shower in 3 minutes. Eat what's handed to you. Don't speak to strangers. Don't come back without cash." He could hear it in his head. He rubbed his thumb over the rim of the coffee mug, then asked, "Do we have enough to move?" Harper answered carefully. "We have enough to bring in a tactical unit, if you want to go federal. Or we can go with private child protection enforcement through Sienna's contacts. She knows the judge who signs off on high-risk removals." Elliot didn't hesitate. "We go private, quiet, but effective. Understood." He stood again, restless. What's Brant doing today? Caleb has eyes on him. He's scheduled to drive 4 of the kids downtown to the market district. Same newspaper route, Jayden no. He and Lila haven't been sent out in 2 days. Why we think he's being punished? Elliot closed his eyes for a long moment. The boy had returned a $100 bill, and now he was probably locked in a room, cold, hungry, with his sister curled up beside him, wondering why her stomach wouldn't stop growling. That was the price of telling the truth in Brant's house. "Move," Elliot said, his voice sharper now. "I want everything ready by tonight. I'll alert Caleb and Sienna." Harper paused. "You sure you want to be there?" "Yes." I mean, physically, yes, Elliot repeated. If you think I'm letting someone else show up and take credit for fixing this, you've forgotten who I am. Harper didn't argue. She just replied softly, I'll bring a vest. By 8 p.m., the city had dipped into darkness. A cold front had rolled in, and the sky above Ravenshill hung low and heavy like it hadn't exhaled all day. The alley behind Ashby Lane was slick with rain. Elliot stood beside Caleb Monroe and Sienna Marks in an unmarked SUV parked 3 houses down. His breath fogged the inside of the windshield. In his hand was the same folded newspaper Jayden had sold him that first night. He didn't even know why he brought it. Maybe to remind himself this started with something small, something honest, a single bill, a single voice. Sir, you dropped this. Sienna's voice crackled through the comms. Team Bravo is in position. House perimeter is sealed. Inside, we estimate 3 children in the basement, 2 in the main room. Brant is upstairs. 1 teen is on watch outside, probably the same one who pulled Jayden away from you last week. Elliot tapped his earpiece. Let's bring them home. The operation began without sound. No sirens, no yelling, just precision. 2 men approached from the side entrance, cutting the power in under 8 seconds. 3 more breached the rear shed. A final group used the front door unlocked. Within 1 minute, they had Brant restrained in the upstairs hallway, screaming, confused, threatening lawsuits. You can't do this. I'm their guardian. I've got rights. You forfeited those rights the moment you sold them for cash. One of the officers replied coldly. Elliot waited in the SUV, heart pounding, until the second door opened, and Jayden appeared. He wasn't running. He wasn't crying. He was just standing in the doorway. Lila pressed into his side, her eyes wide and uncertain. A young social worker approached him, kneeling to his level, but Jayden's gaze drifted past her, straight to Elliot. Recognition lit his face, a flicker of something almost like relief. Elliot stepped out of the vehicle slowly. He didn't say anything. Jayden didn't either. He just took a step forward, then another, then stopped 3 feet away. Are you with them? He asked softly. I'm with you, Elliot replied. Jayden blinked once. Lila whimpered and clung tighter. Elliot looked down at her. Hey, little one, he whispered. You're safe now. He reached out his hand, slowly, not forcing it. And after a long pause, Jayden took it. Lila followed. Elliot crouched to meet them both, his coat quickly soaked through from the rain. Knees on the pavement, hands trembling. You came back, Jayden whispered. I said I would, Elliot replied. A tear slid down Jayden's cheek, but he didn't brush it away. That night, 9 children were taken into protective custody. Russell Brant was placed under federal investigation for child endangerment, illegal guardianship fraud, and multiple counts of abuse. The story never made the papers, because Elliot Vance didn't want it to. This wasn't about headlines. This was about a boy who didn't flinch, a girl who never complained, and a promise that someone, someday, would stay. For the first time in his life, Elliot wasn't building a brand. He was building a rescue, and it started with a hand reaching out in the rain. The house on Ashby Lane was silent now. 2 days had passed since the rescue, and the children were relocated to a temporary facility outside city limits neutral ground with trained trauma staff, round-the-clock care, and doors that didn't lock from the outside. Jayden hadn't spoken much. He'd given short answers when necessary. watched everything with eyes too sharp for a 10-year-old, and refused to let Lila out of his sight for more than a few minutes at a time. Even when they offered her a warm bath, clean pajamas, soft slippers, he stood by the door, silent, guarding. Elliot visited the center on the third day. He hadn't planned to stay long. He told Harper he just wanted to check in, bring a few things, show face, but when he stepped inside that old stone building tucked into the hills, the smell of oatmeal and crayons hit him harder than expected. The warmth in the air, the sound of cartoons humming low from the corner TV, kids with mismatched socks padding through the halls, and Jayden sitting at a table, coloring, not talking, not smiling, just quietly moving a crayon across a blank sheet of paper. Elliot watched from the doorway for a moment. The boy didn't look up. Lila was curled on a beanbag nearby, fast asleep, arms wrapped around a stuffed rabbit someone had gifted her the night before. Her breathing was soft and even like she finally believed she could rest. Elliot cleared his throat gently. Jayden turned. His expression didn't change. "Hi," Elliot said, his voice low. Jayden didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. Elliot stepped forward, pulled up a chair, and sat beside him. They were both quiet for a while, listening to the soft tick of the wall clock. "You draw?" Elliot asked. Jayden shrugged. "Used to?" He said it like the memory came from decades ago, like it was a part of himself he'd already buried. Elliot looked down at the page. Jayden had drawn a tree. Its trunk was thick, its roots wide, but its leaves were sparse, just a few small circles near the top. "You ever seen a tree like that?" Elliot asked. Jayden hesitated. "I saw one once, behind the shelter in Mountain Ridge, before Brant moved us. Is that where you're from?" Jayden finally looked at him. "No," he said. "I don't know where I'm from." Elliot felt something in his chest crack a little. Jayden set the crayon down. "You're not going to ask me questions like the other people." "What kind of questions? Like what he did, or where I slept, or how many days we didn't eat?" Elliot shook his head slowly. "Not unless you want me to." Jayden looked at him for a long time. Then, after a pause, he asked quietly, "Why'd you come back?" The question landed heavier than Elliot expected. He looked toward the window. The hills rolled quiet and green beyond the glass. "Because you did something most people don't," Elliot said. "You saw something wrong and didn't look away. You told the truth, even though it cost you." Jayden didn't speak, and because I dropped something that day. Elliot continued. "Not just money, something else. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I think I do now." Jayden's voice was barely above a whisper. "What was it?" Elliot turned back to him. "Purpose." They sat in silence again, not because it was awkward, but because it didn't need filling. After a while, Jayden asked, "What happens now?" Elliot hesitated. "That's what I came to talk to you about." He reached into his coat and pulled out a slim folder, placing it on the table between them. Jayden didn't touch it. He waited. "I started something," Elliot said, "a foundation to help kids like you, to fight the systems that failed you, but it's more than that. I want to offer something else." Jayden tilted his head, skeptical. "I want you and Lila to come live with me." The words hung there, suspended. Jayden blinked. "Like, live? Yes, my home, your room, your rules, if that's something you'd want." Jayden didn't answer. He glanced toward the sleeping figure of his sister, then back at Elliot. "Why us, I don't know," Elliot admitted. "Maybe because when I met you, you reminded me who I used to be. Before all the money, before the boardrooms." Jayden looked down at the folder, then back up. "You don't know what it's like, having someone look at you like you're not worth anything. Every day, like you're just something they're stuck with." Elliot nodded slowly. "I don't know what that's like, but I do know what it's like to be looked at and not seen." Jayden studied him for a long time. "Can I think about it?" "Of course." Jayden glanced down. "Can I ask something else?" "Anything." Jayden's eyes were dark, sharp. "If we come with you, do we stop being projects?" Elliot's reply was quiet, firm. "You were never projects. You're people, your family, if you want to be." Jayden didn't smile, but his shoulders dropped just slightly, and when Lila stirred awake 10 minutes later and saw Elliot, she didn't hide behind Jayden. She walked over, sleepy-eyed, and climbed into Elliot's lap like she'd done it 1,000 times before. He froze, then gently wrapped an arm around her. Jayden watched the whole thing, then picked up his crayon again and started to draw leaves. 3 days later, Elliot stood in the doorway of the room. He never thought he'd prepare for anyone but himself. It had been unused for years, just a sterile guest suite with untouched sheets and a view of the skyline from the 23rd floor. But now, the bed had been remade in soft blues and grays, with shelves waiting to be filled, and a stuffed bear sitting near the pillow. Harper had picked it out, leaving it there without saying a word. Jayden stood beside him, arms folded tightly across his chest, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning every detail like he was preparing for disappointment. "It's yours," Elliot said. Jayden didn't answer, just stepped inside and walked slowly to the window. The city glowed below them, a river of lights stretching into the hills. "No locks," he asked. "No locks." Elliot confirmed. Jayden turned toward the closet, opened it, then checked behind the door, as if some old part of him still needed proof that this room didn't hide a catch. Elliot didn't rush him. "Where's Lila gonna sleep? She has the room right across the hall. Same setup, smaller bed, but pink everything. You'll like it." Jayden gave a small nod. "She hates pink," he muttered. Elliot smiled. "We'll fix that." He reached for a small box he'd left by the dresser and opened it. "Thought you might want to unpack these yourself." Inside were the drawings, the ones Jayden had made at the center, the tree, the small figures under it, a few more, too. One of Lila holding a balloon, another of a shadowy house with no doors. Jayden's face twitched. He didn't reach for them yet, but he didn't look away. "Thank you," he said quietly. Elliot gave him a moment before saying, "Dinner's in 30 minutes. Just the 3 of us. No speeches, no guests." "You like spaghetti," Jayden shrugged. "Lila does. Good enough for me?" And with that, Elliot left him to settle in. Downstairs, he found Lila curled in a new beanbag chair, thumbing through a picture book. She wore soft pajamas and had one of her socks half off again. Her toes curled playfully into the edge of the chair. "Hi, sweetheart," Elliot said gently. She looked up and gave the faintest smile. Still no words. But now, when he sat near her, she didn't flinch. She held out the book, pointing to a picture of a tiger. "You like that one?" he asked. She nodded. "I do too. Strong. Brave." He tapped the page, but gentle with their cubs. He wasn't sure if she understood all the words, but she leaned her head against his arm and stayed there. Harper watched from the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Later, over dinner, Jayden sat stiffly at the end of the table, pushing pasta around his plate, fork scraping lightly against porcelain. "Do you cook?" he asked after a while. Elliot looked up, surprised. "No, not well." Jayden nodded. "My mom used to, before she left." Elliot didn't press. He let the silence stretch, the way you might let a song finish before changing the station. "You miss her?" he asked quietly. Jayden shrugged. Sometimes I don't remember her voice anymore, but I remember her hands. She had strong hands. She used to braid Lila's hair even when she was tired. He stared down at his plate, shoulders tense. I wish she'd fought harder. Elliot reached for his glass, took a sip, then said something he hadn't expected to say. "My mother was sick for years. She fought hard, but sometimes even the strong ones lose." Jayden looked up. They didn't speak for a while after that. Later, when Lila began to doze off in her chair, Elliot carried her up gently. She murmured something, just sounds, not words, and pressed her cheek against his collarbone. She smelled like soap and strawberries. He laid her in bed, pulled the covers up, and dimmed the lights. Jayden stood in the hallway, watching. "She doesn't remember the bad nights," he said. "Good," Elliot whispered. "That's a blessing. She might someday. If she does, she won't be alone when it happens." Jayden hesitated. "Then sometimes I feel like if I stop remembering, it'll mean none of it mattered. Like if I let myself be happy here, I'm betraying the kids who didn't get out." Elliot didn't respond right away. Instead, he crouched to meet Jayden's eye level. "You're allowed to be happy. Jayden, even if the world was unfair, your happiness doesn't erase your pain. It proves you survived it." Jayden's face twisted, something raw behind his eyes. He didn't cry, but he reached out and gripped Elliot's shoulder for a moment before slipping away into his room. That night, Elliot didn't work. He didn't open his laptop or review any earnings reports. He sat in the living room, a book in hand, unread, and listened to the quiet. And when he finally rose to check on them both before bed, he found Lila asleep with her hand on the tiger book. And Jayden. He had drawn a new tree. This one had leaves, and under it, 3 figures, 1 tall, 2 small, no shadows, just light. It was the kind of morning Elliot had begun to treasure quiet, routine, almost gentle. He had just brewed a second pot of coffee, the scent curling through the high ceilings of the penthouse. Jayden was sitting on the balcony with a book open in his lap. Lila curled on a blanket beside him, drawing with sidewalk chalk. The city below stirred to life like a sleeping animal distant horns, the clink of garbage trucks, the hum of elevators. Elliot leaned against the doorway for a moment, just watching. The boy and girl looked like they belonged in a painting, not a file folder marked neglect or emergency removal. That's when the buzzer rang. It wasn't Harper. She never used the main entrance. And it wasn't delivery. He hadn't ordered anything. He pressed the intercom. "Who is it?" A male voice came through, low and clipped. "My name's Deshaun Cole. I'm here for my brother." Elliot froze. "Brother." He buzzed Harper immediately. She answered on the second ring. "There's a man downstairs claiming to be Jayden's brother. I'm on my way," she said. "Don't let him up until we verify." Jayden stepped back inside a minute later, barefoot, holding a glass of juice. "What's wrong?" Elliot knelt down slightly. "Jayden, do you have an older brother?" The boy's face went completely still. He didn't blink. Then, finally, he said, "I used to." Elliot kept his voice soft. "He's downstairs. Says his name is Deshaun. Do you want to see him?" Jayden's grip tightened on the glass. Then he whispered, "Not alone." 30 minutes later. The man was seated in the corner of Elliot's office, facing Jayden across a coffee table. Elliot and Harper stood nearby, quiet but alert. Deshaun was tall, built like a former linebacker, wearing an old leather jacket and a guarded expression. He looked like someone who'd seen both prison walls and hospital waiting rooms. Jayden didn't say anything at first, neither did his brother. Then, finally, Deshaun said, "You got tall." Jayden shrugged. "You got gone." The man looked down, jaw tight. "I didn't know where they took you. Foster system scattered everyone. I didn't even know Lila was born until I heard about the raid. From who Elliot asked." Deshaun looked up. "I know a guy in city intake. When Brant's name came across his desk, he called me, said 2 Cole kids were found. I asked him to trace where they went." Jayden's voice was sharp now. "You left. I was 17. They shipped me to a state rehab center in Stockton after Mom got arrested. I couldn't sign for you, couldn't even call. I wrote letters but didn't know where to send them. They told me you were placed out of state. You never came back. I tried. Jay, don't call me that." The words cut hard and flat. Jayden stood, pacing now. I waited. Every birthday, every storm, every time someone slammed a door too loud, I kept thinking, "Deshaun will come." But you didn't. Deshaun's voice cracked. I didn't know how bad it got. Jayden turned to Elliot. "Can you make him leave now?" Elliot met the boy's eyes. "I can." But Deshaun stood up. "Wait. I didn't come to take you away. I just wanted to see you. See her. I'm not here to fight custody. I don't want anything." He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I just brought this." Jayden didn't take it, but he didn't look away either. "It's a letter. From Mom." Jayden blinked. Deshaun swallowed. They let her write it before she passed. Liver failure. She died in County Holden 6 months ago. Silence swallowed the room. Jayden sat down again, slower this time. His eyes didn't leave the paper. "I don't want it right now," he said quietly. "That's okay," Deshaun said, placing it gently on the table. "You take your time." He turned to Elliot. "Thank you for not turning them away." "I didn't save them." Elliot replied. "Jayden saved her. I just finally showed up." Deshaun nodded, then added, "You don't need to worry. I've got a job, a small place. I'm clean. But I'm not here to fight. If they're happy here, let them stay." He glanced at his brother one more time. "Maybe one day, if you want, we could get pancakes or something." Jayden didn't answer, but he didn't say no. After Deshaun left, the apartment felt heavier, like grief had crept in through the seams of the windows and settled in the corners. Jayden didn't speak for the rest of the evening. At one point, Elliot found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the unopened letter. He didn't look up when Elliot approached. "He was good once," Jayden said softly. "Taught me how to climb fences, how to tell when someone's lying, but he also taught me how to stop waiting." Elliot sat beside him. "You don't have to open it now." "I know." They sat in silence again. This time, Elliot noticed how naturally it happened, how quiet had become their way of breathing without pressure. "Can I still stay here?" Jayden asked. Elliot turned to him, surprised. "Yes, of course. Why would you think otherwise?" Jayden shrugged. "People don't usually stay when things get complicated." Elliot exhaled slowly. "Well, I'm not most people." Jayden looked at him, then finally reached for the letter. He didn't open it, but he held it, carefully, like something fragile that might break if rushed. That night, after Lila was tucked in and the lights dimmed across the penthouse, Jayden sat on the balcony again. This time, Elliot joined him. They didn't say much, just watched the city blink below, and for the first time in a long time, Elliot thought maybe this was what healing looked like. Not a grand gesture, not courtroom victories, just a boy holding a letter he wasn't ready to read, and a man sitting beside him, not asking him to. Elliot didn't see it coming. The morning began, like most others, quiet coffee. Lila humming to herself in the kitchen, Jayden sitting cross-legged on the living room rug with the science book open beside a half-finished bowl of cereal. Then Harper walked in, holding her phone like it was a loaded weapon. "You need to read this," she said. Elliot reached for the screen. She didn't hand it over. She read it aloud. "Billionaire CEO Elliot Vance hiding foster children in penthouse. Secret ties to illegal raid in Ashby District." He blinked. "What it's running on 3 major outlets, online only, for now. But the push is picking up. Someone leaked the report, possibly a judge's aide. They're framing the raid as unauthorized." Jayden had frozen mid-page, his eyes locked onto Elliot. "Are they coming for us?" "No," Elliot said instantly, then turned to Harper. They might try," she said. "If the narrative spins hard enough, they could push for an emergency welfare review." Jayden stood. "I'm not going back." "You're not," Elliot said, firm. "They'd have to get through me first." But he could already feel it, the machinery of public scrutiny beginning to turn. News vans, legal letters, half-truths dressed up as investigation. He sat down slowly, hands steepled beneath his chin. "I need to control the story," he said. "You sure?" Harper asked. "You open that door. You can't close it. This won't be a private rescue anymore. It'll be national. You'll have to explain everything." Elliot looked at Jayden, who hadn't moved. "I'm sure." Within hours, a statement was drafted. Elliot insisted on writing it himself. No lawyers, no PR filter, just truth. That evening, he stood at a podium inside the Vance Foundation building with every major media outlet in the city watching. He didn't wear a tie. He didn't rehearse. "I'm not going to apologize," he said into the microphone, calm but unwavering. "I'm not going to hide. 3 weeks ago, I met a child in an alley who returned a $100 bill I didn't even know I dropped. He asked me nothing, took nothing. He simply did what was right. His name is Jayden Cole. His sister is Lila, and they were being held in an unlicensed home under the care of a man whose records will speak for themselves in court. I supported the intervention. I funded the shelter that now houses the other rescued children. And I have offered Jayden and Lila my home, because they deserve one." There were murmurs, camera shutters, a few gasps from reporters who hadn't expected such a direct approach. "I'm aware that some of my board members are concerned. I'm aware this story doesn't look good on paper. But if any of you want to have a conversation about optics while children are being abused under legal blind spots, you can find another company to worry about." He paused. "I'm not backing down. No applause, just silence." the kind that lingers when people don't know how to respond to truth. That night, the internet exploded. He did not drop. Them trended for 12 hours straight. Some people called him reckless. Others called him a hero. A few called for an investigation into the foster system itself, but no one could ignore him. Jayden watched the press conference from the apartment. When Elliot returned, still untucking his shirt, Jayden was sitting on the couch waiting. "You meant it?" he asked quietly. "Every word." Elliot replied. Jayden looked down at his hands. "No one's ever defended me before. You deserve it." Jayden nodded slowly, then asked, "Does this mean people will hate us now?" Elliot walked over and sat beside him. "Some might, but the ones who matter, they'll see what I saw." Jayden stared ahead at the blank TV screen, then whispered, "Can I sleep in your room tonight?" Elliot's breath caught. He didn't ask why. He simply stood, held out his hand, and said, "Come on." That night, Lila curled into her usual place near Elliot's shoulder. Jayden curled on the other side, blanket up to his chin. He didn't cry, but he didn't need to be alone either. The next day brought something Elliot hadn't expected: a visitor. When Harper opened the door and whispered, "It's her," he almost didn't believe it. Then he saw her, Judge Helen Dray, one of the most respected juvenile court judges in the state, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, her painfully exact interpretation of the law, and her utter refusal to bend under pressure. She stood in the foyer, coat still on, a folder clutched in her arms. "I'm not here to make a scene," she said. "I just want to see the children." Elliot led her inside. Lila was coloring quietly in the den. Jayden sat by the window, folding paper into the beginnings of a plane. He looked up as she entered. "I know who you are," he said evenly. She nodded. "I know who you are, too. I read what you wrote about us, and I came to see if it was true." Jayden stood slowly. "Do you always wait for stories to become headlines before checking the truth?" The judge's jaw tightened. "No, but I've made mistakes before." He looked at her, then said something that made Elliot's chest tighten. "I'm tired of being someone's mistake." Judge Dray didn't answer immediately. Then she crouched to Lila's level, studied her coloring. She seemed safe. "She is," Elliot said. Dray stood and opened the folder. "This isn't about removing them. Not anymore. The motion's been withdrawn." Why, Elliot asked. "Because I saw your press conference, and I saw the paper trail Harper Lane sent to my office 3 hours later. It's all there. Brandt's falsified forms, the cash withdrawals, the offshore routing through fake education charities. It's airtight." Jayden stared at her. "Do you think we're safe here?" She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "But that's not enough. I'm here to ask permission." Permission for what Elliot asked. Judge Dray turned to him. "To let me testify on your behalf if this goes federal. I want to help fix what allowed this to happen in the first place." Jayden nodded, slowly, and, for the first time, he extended his hand to someone new. She shook it, firmly, like it mattered, and it did. Because maybe justice wasn't just a system. Maybe it was a person finally standing still long enough to say, "I see you, and this time I won't look away." The invitation arrived in the form of a cream-colored envelope, hand-delivered and unmarked. Harper found it at the front desk the next morning. She didn't open it right away, just stared at the handwriting, elegant, slanted, strangely familiar. She brought it to Elliot during breakfast. He unfolded the letter in silence while Lila spooned cereal beside him and Jayden pushed scrambled eggs around with his fork. The letter was short, a single paragraph. From the office of the Governor's Child Welfare Task Force, they were inviting Elliot to join a statewide reform summit as a keynote speaker. It wasn't just about funding now. It was about changing the law, changing oversight, changing the fate of children like Jayden and Lila before more names were buried in closed-case files. They want you to lead a round table with district judges, Harper said, lawmakers, advocates, even survivors. Elliot exhaled. Jayden looked up. Does this mean we won? Elliot shook his head gently. It means they noticed. That afternoon, Judge Dre called. There's something you need to see before the summit, she said. We've secured the Ashby property. It's safe now, but you should walk it, you and the boy. Elliot hesitated. He's just starting to sleep again, and this could help him keep sleeping. That evening, Elliot pulled Jayden aside. He didn't push. He simply said, the judge wants to take us back. One time, to see it, Jayden didn't speak. Then, slowly, he asked, will it smell the same? Elliot blinked. Maybe. I remember the smell. Mold, old food, something metallic. He looked up. If I go back, and I leave different, Elliot nodded once. I think that's the whole point. 2 days later, they stood on the cracked sidewalk in front of 72 Ashby Lane. The house was boarded, its windows covered in police tape and plywood. The yard had been cleared, but the stains on the concrete porch hadn't faded yet. Inside, the rooms were empty now. Furniture gone, locks removed, shadows chased into corners. Jayden stepped through the doorway first. No hesitation, just quiet steps. Elliot followed. The air was still. Jayden walked through the hallway without flinching, pointed to the corner beneath the stairs. That's where Lila slept. In the winter, it was cold enough to see her breath. He turned toward a second door. That closet. He used to lock me in there when I talked too loud. Elliot said nothing. Let the boy narrate his own survival. Jayden kept walking. This used to be the kitchen. He'd make himself steak and throw me a piece of bread. Lila never liked bread, so I'd eat hers too. He stopped suddenly in the middle of the living room. Elliot waited. Jayden's voice cracked for the first time. There was a wall here. He reached toward a now bare beam. It had a drawing. Lila scribbled it with a red crayon, a sun and 2 stick people. He painted over it that night, yelled for hours. I told her never to draw again. He looked up. She never did. Elliot's chest ached. He walked to Jayden and stood beside him. You know you can draw it again, he said softly. Jayden nodded, tears glinting. Then, from his pocket, he pulled a folded paper and slowly unfolded it. He had drawn it. A sun, 2 stick people, one small, one bigger, holding hands. He walked over and laid the drawing against the bare beam. Let it rest there, no tape, no nails, just presence. They stayed like that for a long time. Then Jayden turned and walked out on his own. Elliot followed behind. When they stepped into daylight, Jayden didn't squint. He looked forward, chin higher than before. Thank you, he whispered. Elliot placed a hand on his shoulder. No need. Jayden shook his head. There is, because people saw this house and walked by. You didn't. That night, Jayden spoke more at dinner than he had all week. He told Lila he saw her drawing again. He told Harper about the quiet. He told Elliot that maybe, just maybe, he wanted to speak at the summit too. "I'm not polished," he said, "but I want people to hear it from someone who lived it." Elliot blinked, then smiled. "Then they will." Harper leaned in, amused. "You know, public speaking is terrifying." "Right?" Jayden grinned a little. "Not as terrifying as the dark under those stairs." Lila didn't understand the joke, but she giggled anyway, and her laughter sounded like something holy in the quiet of that penthouse. Later that night, Elliot stood at his office window, phone to his ear. "You still awake?" he asked. "I am now," Judge Dre's voice said, dry but kind. "Jayden wants to speak." Silence. "Then I'll make space for him." 10 minutes, right before the governor. "You think he can do it?" "I think he already has." When Elliot returned to the living room, he found Jayden asleep on the couch, the red crayon drawing resting on his chest. Lila was next to him, clutching his arm, her eyelids fluttering in a dream, and somewhere in the deepest part of Elliot's heart, a quiet voice whispered, "Maybe this is what rebuilding looks like. Not perfect, not quick, but real." The auditorium was packed. Reporters, judges, advocates, survivors, business leaders who had never stepped foot inside a courtroom unless it was for mergers, and state officials who measured success in percentages and bills passed. But this time, the conversation wasn't about revenue or re-election. This time, they were here for a boy. Jayden sat in the green room backstage, knees bouncing, tie crooked. He wore the navy blazer Harper had bought him, slightly too big at the shoulders, but clean, crisp, and his... Lila sat beside him, braiding one of her dolls. Elliot stood nearby, adjusting his cuffs but keeping his distance. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. Jayden nodded. "I need to." He didn't say it for himself. He said it for the kids still sleeping in cold basements. The MC's voice echoed from the auditorium speakers. And now, a brief address from someone who doesn't hold public office, doesn't sign legislative bills, and doesn't have a foundation named after him, but he knows something we don't. Please welcome Jayden Cole. The door opened. The stagehand nodded. Jayden rose. Elliot reached to steady his collar. Jayden brushed him off gently, but firmly. "I got it." And then he walked onto that stage. No music, no preamble, just footsteps. The microphone stood too tall for him. He didn't ask for help. He didn't fumble. He stepped in front of it, cleared his throat, and began. "My name is Jayden Cole. I'm 10 years old. I lived in a house where the windows were nailed shut. The locks were on the outside, and my sister thought silence was safety. There wasn't a sound in the room. I wasn't supposed to survive. People said I was resilient, but they don't know what that word means. Resilient means you kept going, but it also means you had to go through something bad in the first place, and nobody should have to." He glanced at the back row. "There are people here who talk about systems and budgets and policies. That's good. But while you're writing new rules, kids like me are sleeping in places you wouldn't leave your dog. You think we don't notice, we do." He held up the red crayon drawing, now laminated. "This is the first thing my sister ever drew. She stopped drawing after the man who was supposed to care for us yelled at her and painted over it. But now it's mine, and it's back." He paused. "I'm not here to cry. I'm here to tell you that I don't need another apology. I need you to remember that we are real. We don't live in charts. We live in rooms you don't see." The auditorium was dead silent. Then he said, simply, "Do better," and walked off. No dramatic close, no bow, no waiting for applause, just truth, raw, unfiltered, unpolished, and that's why it landed. The room didn't erupt into applause, not right away. People sat still, stunned by what they'd heard. Then the ripple began. A few people stood, then more, then all. A standing ovation for a 10-year-old who carried a folded drawing in his pocket like a torch. Elliot met him backstage. Jayden didn't smile. He just leaned into Elliot's chest and whispered, "I feel lighter." "You made the whole room heavier," Elliot said, wrapping him in a quiet hug. In the best way. That evening, Elliot received an email. No subject line, no sender name. The message read, "You've made powerful enemies. You might want to check your security systems. Not everyone thinks you're a hero. Some of us remember who you used to be." He read it twice, then again. Harper stood across the room, reviewing summit transcripts. He said nothing. Just closed the laptop. Later, when Lila was asleep and Jayden sat sketching on the floor, Elliot stepped onto the balcony and dialed Caleb Monroe, a retired cop who'd helped track Brant in the beginning. "Caleb, I need a favor," Elliot said. "You sound like you just got a death threat." Caleb replied dryly. Elliot stared out at the Ravens Hill skyline. "I think I did." They met the next morning. Caleb wore his old badge clipped to a plain hoodie. He walked like someone who didn't need to explain his purpose. "Give me the IP. We'll trace it," Caleb said. "In the meantime, tighten up your cameras, secure the elevators, and don't leave them alone for a second." Elliot nodded, then asked, quietly, "Why would someone come after me now? I'm not a threat to them." "You were harmless before," Caleb replied. "Just another CEO. But now you've put faces on the failures, and faces are harder to ignore than numbers." By the time Elliot returned to the penthouse, he found Jayden in the office. The boy looked up, pale. "It's all over the news," he said. "People love it, but they hate it." He held up a tablet with a headline, "Is Elliot Vance exploiting a child for sympathy?" Elliot knelt beside him. "Jayden, you're not a symbol. You're not a project. You're a person. And the only reason you were on that stage is because you chose to be." Jayden looked down. What if people forget anyway? What if nothing changes? Elliot thought for a long time before answering. Maybe they will, but not all of them, and not forever. Jayden turned toward the window. "I'm scared again." Elliot placed a hand on his back. "Me too." And for once, the honesty between them didn't weaken the air. It strengthened it. That night, Harper quietly installed new biometric locks on the apartment. Caleb swept the building. Elliot sat with Lila longer than usual, brushing her hair until she fell asleep, mumbling the words to a song she hadn't heard since before Ashby Lane. And, in the stillness that followed, Elliot stared out at the city. For years, he had built a tower so tall no one could touch him. Now, he would tear down every wall if it meant someone like Jayden never had to build one to begin with. It happened 2 days after the summit. A quiet Wednesday evening, the kind that came with takeout containers spread across the marble counter. Lila's laughter echoing down the hallway, and Jayden carefully setting the table like it was a ritual. Harper had gone home early for once. Caleb was due to stop by in the morning, and Elliot had just sent off the final edits for the Vance Foundation's new grant announcement, focused entirely on safe foster housing. Everything felt still, which is why the shatter was so loud. Jayden was the first to hear it glass breaking near the back entrance. He froze mid-step. Elliot stood instantly, gesturing quietly for Jayden to move behind him. He didn't panic. He didn't shout. He just moved, quickly and precisely, to the drawer beneath the stove where Caleb had placed a small emergency beacon. He pressed it once. The silent alarm triggered. Lila peeked around the corner. Jayden grabbed her, pulling her gently into the hallway closet just like Elliot had taught them during drills. The back door opened, footsteps, heavy, confident, not rushed. Elliot didn't wait. He stepped into the hallway and spoke before he could be surprised. "You have 60 seconds before this place is surrounded." The figure came into view. A man, late 50s, tailored jacket, pressed shirt. Calm, even pleasant on the surface. But Elliot knew that face. Gerald Langston, one of the board's oldest members. A man who donated to charities only when the cameras were on, who had opposed Elliot's public statements after the Ashby case and warned that his sentimental crusade was threatening shareholder confidence. "I rang the bell," Langston said coolly. No one answered. "You broke in. I needed to talk. Alone. This isn't how you talk to someone, Gerald, especially not someone housing 2 traumatized kids." Langston stepped forward, hands raised like a man avoiding blame. "This is bigger than you think, Elliot. There are contracts, international ties. If you keep pushing these reforms, you'll unravel things that are, how do I put this, delicately balanced. This case, the kids. They were never supposed to make headlines. They weren't supposed to survive. You mean Langston didn't deny it? You've made enemies. I've made a home." Langston scoffed. "And what happens when that home burns down? You can't protect them from every angle. One slip-on media twist and it all collapses. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. The next time a microphone is shoved in your face, remember who your friends were." Jayden stepped into the room. He shouldn't have. Elliot wanted to tell him to stay back, but the boy's face was different now. Not fearful, not angry. Clear. "You're the one who told the papers," Jayden said. Langston blinked. "I don't talk to children." "Then start learning," Jayden replied. Standing straighter, "I saw your name on the donation form for the house on Ashby. You signed off on it through your shell company. You knew what was happening. You paid for it to keep happening." Elliot turned slowly. "Is that true?" Langston adjusted his collar. That house was under many layers of oversight. "That's not an answer. It's the only one you'll get. And I suggest you take it." Just then, the elevator dinged. 2 officers stepped out, followed by Caleb Monroe. Langston turned, his expression souring. "Mr. Langston," Caleb said casually, "this is a private residence. You're trespassing." Langston didn't argue. He looked back once, gaze resting on Jayden. "You think you've won something," he muttered. Jayden didn't flinch. "I've already won. I'm not afraid of you." Langston turned and left with the officers. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clean, like a door had finally shut for good. Elliot turned to Jayden. "You okay?" Jayden nodded. "He's the kind of man who counts on us staying scared." "You weren't, because you weren't." Elliot exhaled, walked to him, and crouched slightly. "You saved her. You stood on a stage. You stared down a monster. You've done more in 10 years than most people do in a lifetime." Jayden looked toward the hallway closet where Lila peeked out, her curls wild and wide eyes blinking. "You can come out," he said softly. The bad guy's gone. She ran into his arms without hesitation. That night, they all slept in the same room. Lila between Elliot and Jayden, snoring softly, Jayden staring up at the ceiling, thinking. "Do you still think about the person you used to be?" he asked suddenly. Elliot opened his eyes. "Every day. Are you ashamed?" "Yes," Elliot said honestly, "but not of how I changed. I'm ashamed it took me so long." Jayden turned his head. "Do you think I'll grow up and forget all this?" Elliot paused. "I think you'll grow up and remember it differently. How not as the pain, but as the moment you decided it wouldn't be the end." Jayden let that sink in, then whispered, "Can I stay here forever?" Elliot didn't answer right away. He sat up, reached into the drawer by the bed, and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Jayden. Inside was a document, adoption papers, signed, witnessed, filed. Jayden stared at it. "Silent," Elliot said. "I didn't want to show you until you were ready to choose. You don't owe me anything, but I'd be honored to call you my son." Jayden looked down at the paper again, then over at Lila, who curled her fingers tighter around his hand, then back at Elliot. He nodded, eyes stinging. "You already feel like my dad." The next morning, the world kept turning. But for Elliot Vance and the Cole children, something had shifted forever. Not just names on documents, not just stories in newspapers, but a bond no court could define. A family not built by blood or charity or press conferences, but by choice, by quiet moments in loud storms, by trust earned slowly, and love that didn't need to announce itself, only protect, always. They say family is who shows up when the world turns away. Elliot Vance didn't expect to find redemption in a crumpled $100 bill. Jayden never imagined that someone would stay. And little Lila. She finally sleeps through the night. But behind their healing is a darker truth. There are still children locked behind closed doors. Still abusers protected by bureaucracy. Still systems that look the other way until someone forces them to see. This story isn't just fiction. It's a reminder, a call, a mirror. To anyone who's ever questioned if one voice matters, let Jayden's tell you it does. To anyone who's ever stood between power and protection, let Elliot's journey show what quiet courage looks like. And to every Lila out there still waiting to be seen, we owe you more than rescue. We owe you justice. If this story moved you, share it. Let it echo louder than fear, deeper than silence. Leave us a comment. What part of the story stayed with you the most? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that matter. Because sometimes it only takes one honest child to change a billionaire in the world.